Okay, guys, welcome to the episode 22 of the Full Funnel B2B Marketing Show. Today we have Chris Walker. Chris is one of my favorite B2B marketers who is always and consistently creating valuable content. And besides this, Chris is CEO of Refine Labs, a marketing agency that helps companies optimizing their revenue model with a combination of revenue operations, cross marketing, buyer enablement. And actually today I want to chat with Chris about how to accelerate business growth through revenue operations, how to define revenue operations, and how to pivot your company from traditional marketing to revenue operations. Thanks a lot for joining me today.
Really happy to be here, Andre.
I want, as I mentioned, I want to chat with you about revenue operations and growth marketing because both things became a buzzword recently, and many people are talking about them, but not many can clearly define what revenue operations are all about. So thoughts on it? How do you determine the revenue operations?
Sure, yeah. So I agree with you that a lot of people have a lot of different definitions for the term revenue operations. The way that I define it is the tools, operations, enablement, and analytics across the entire revenue cycle. So that would be marketing, sales, customer success, or account management. And so how do you, instead of taking sales operations or sales enablement, how do you create a function that goes across the entire revenue cycle that does all of those different things? Other people will define it as tactically as how do you get credit card payments and things like that. And sure, like that is a part of revenue operations, is collecting revenue. However, I see it as a much more broad topic that takes away siloed functions. For instance, again, sales operations, and allows those functions to work across the entire revenue journey. And as well, cool. With a focus not only on your company's revenue, but also optimizing the buying experience or the customer experience.
Totally agree with you. And from your point of view, who should be in charge of revenue operations? Should be CMO be in charge, or should it be like what's a core role who will be in charge of revenue operations in organizations?
I get questions a lot about who should be responsible for what, and I really think that it depends. I think it depends on the skill sets of the people that are in those roles at the company, right? And so there's a lot of different ways that you could slice it. You could have a separate C-suite or VP level person in charge of revenue operations that works alongside the head of sales and the head of marketing. That's one way that you could do it. I actually kind of like that idea. There's another way where I could sit underneath the head of sales or the head of marketing. So I don't think that there's a right or wrong way to slice it organizationally. It's really about looking at what skills the CMO, the head of marketing, the rest of the organization have, and whether or not they're aligned with that the core objectives of the revenue operations function.
Got it. In one of your posts on LinkedIn, you mentioned that you were one demand gen person doing all of the things for one company, like market research, community management, working with influencers, outreach, and all other marketing and sales operations. And you mentioned that future marketing leaders should understand how all of these things work together. And from your point of view, do you think every marketer should take this approach?
I'm not sure that every marketer should take this approach, but just to take a step back for the audience to know. So I built from the ground up a demand function in a $30 million company that was 100% outbound when I got there. And so when I think about demand gen, I think about creating demand where people come inbound to buy things from you. A lot of people have different definitions of demand gen as well, but that's the way that I think about it. I think about it as core marketing, not cold outbound sales. And so I built that function from the ground up, me, myself, doing all of the different inner workings, from figuring out what content to create, to doing the market research, to integrating HubSpot with Salesforce, to figuring out how we're going to hand off leads from marketing to sales, to figure out how we're going to track pipeline and report to the CEO on the results. And through that 2 years of experience, I believe that I was able to get both a breadth and a depth of knowledge that is much deeper and stronger than a lot of marketers get the opportunity to do, because I was gifted with the situation to do that all on my own. And so I think that as companies get larger, there are more and more specialization of roles. And so one thing that it's worked for me. I'm not sure if it would work for everybody, but what worked for me is working at small or smaller, fast-growing companies where I can do a lot of different things.
That also resonates with me. Totally agree with you. From your point of view, how to pivot your company from traditional marketing and sales to revenue operations? Because, in lots of B2B organizations, you can face a situation where marketing works on brand awareness campaigns, generate MQLs, and there is obviously truth that you can't pay your bills and make a payroll with likes, shares, all of this sort of things, while sales working in fields, generating sales qualified leads, and sales complaining that marketing has no impact on revenue. So what I thought, how to pivot a company from like this traditional marketing and sales activities to revenue operations where they can work as one team to generate revenue.
Yeah, so a couple things that I observed. So just for background, I audit somewhere between 3 and 7 typically SaaS companies per month in growth stage, so Series B and beyond. And some of the things that I see is some companies don't actually do any brand awareness. It's all transactional direct response marketing. And then I think the ones that do brand awareness do it in expensive and ineffective ways, like trade show boosts, traditional marketing, like you said, which I just don't believe to be the most effective use of money to get the result that you're looking for. And so the easiest way to help companies start to transition is to audit the things that they're doing right now against revenue, not leading metrics that marketers usually track. And because most companies are doing direct response marketing, whether it's for an ebook or a webinar with a sales cadence after it, or a get a demo ad or Google AdWords or anything that's like, click this and then fill out a form and then we're going to try and sell you something. That's what most companies are going to run. And so when you have that type of attribution level, you're going to be able to go in and look back at all the people that filled out those forms and how much money that you spent to do that and figure out whether it generated revenue. And then once you figure out how much revenue you generated, you can compare it against how much you spent from a marketing standpoint. And then that would give you marketing CAC. You can calculate it against marketing CAC payback period, which I try and target of less than 6 months as a core target. I think a 3-month CAC payback is exceptional marketing execution. And so let's just pretend you're at 6 months, which is the benchmark, but you go in and look at some companies and their marketing CAC payback just on their advertising spend is several years. And so several years on marketing advertising cost, and then you have all of your marketing employees, and then you have the sales commission that you have to pay out, and then you have the 80% or so margin on the software that you need to deduct the 20% margin, and you realize that it's taking you 5 years to recover the amount of money that you've spent to just acquire that customer. And when you present that type of information to a CEO or a CFO or a CMO or a CRO, anyone that is knowledgeable and has a aligned interest in the business growing, if you can present them with black and white data about whether, and then just have the conversation about whether or not what you're doing is effective right now, you can oftentimes have them consider whether there may be a better approach. The thing where a lot of marketers get stuck, and this, I have a lot of empathy for this, is they don't know what to recommend instead. So they know that the stuff that they're doing isn't working, but they don't know what to do instead, and they're scared to rock the boat, because if they say this isn't working, let's go do something else, and then that other stuff doesn't work as well, then they're at risk of being fired. Right?
Exactly.
And so that it's a tough situation to be in, which gets a lot of people stuck in whatever is accepted within the organization, which is going to be ebook downloads for MQLs, because you can report that you did something, trade show boost with badge scans, anything with direct attribution, AdWords for ebook downloads that give you leads, and so marketers get stuck measuring those types of metrics in order to try and demonstrate that they're doing something.
Totally agree with you. I just, remember at a conversation with one of the clients, and they just attended some trade show, and before the trade show, she asked me what can we do, how we can boost, the results of that trade show. So I thought well, still, it's not my preferable way of interacting with the target audience. But once you applied, once you paid for your for this trade show, so you can at least you can prepare some sort of content hub, so you can try to collaborate with these customers, try to arrange in-depth surveys just to figure out their challenges. So at least you'll learn more about your target audience, and you'll be able to follow up with some relevant content, and you'll be able, probably, if you have a lead nurturing program, so you'll be able to nurture them and at least come up with very precise follow-up. You'll be able to find the gap between their need and your product, and if you'll have a great match, you can do a appropriate follow-up. But once they came back,
I just want to get this question in. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to get this in. I think it's important for the audience for some context. It's I am not against trade shows. I think that trade shows are very valuable. Your customers are there, thought leaders are there, analysts are there, prospects are there. The fact of the matter is that you don't need the booth to get all of the value out of a trade show. You can set up meetings with customers. You can set up drinks with prospects. You can create content with thought leaders. You can do market research, all those different things you don't need a booth for. And so you should go to the trade show. You should send salespeople that can set up meetings. You should send marketers to create content. You should do all those things. But then you should recoup the 20 to hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're wasting on a booth and go and do something more effective with it.
Totally agree with you. So that was all my story about. I'm not against trade shows, but I wanted to share a funny fact, what's going on marketing side. So once I came back, I asked a question can you please share with me the results of this event? And they thought, well, a couple of companies visited us. But what about the results? Did you generate, did you interview, did you make any interview? Did you learn anything about your target audience? Because we prepared a list of questions, and among these questions were questions how do you research products like ours? How do you evaluate? How do you compare products? With who you could compare our products, so we could learn more about the competitors? How do you present if they spoke not to the decision maker? How do you present our product to the decision maker? So the goal was to identify and figure out more information about the buying process, about the buying committee. And actually, what I have heard is a reply, mostly our customers visited us, so we drank coffee with them, we chatted, everything was great. But what about the actual results? Well, it's sort of building relationship event, and oh my gosh, guys! So
marketers, when you start looking at your marketing activities against revenue, you start changing the things that you're doing, because the things that get you a lot of leads usually aren't the things that get you a ton of revenue. And so a lot of marketers get driven to do the wrong things to hit a leading metric of leads that they think will convert through a funnel into revenue, but they never actually look at whether or not that happens. They just assume a blanket conversion rate. If we get 10,000 leads, then we're going to close, blah, blah, blah % of them, and then we're going to get this much revenue. But they never actually look And so all it takes is just literally looking in the data and saying, okay, it didn't actually happen the way that we planned. And the challenge is that it creates, when your marketing is not effective, it creates a lot of pressure on the sales organization to carry the weight of the revenue. And what happens over time is that the business needs to hire more and more salespeople to keep up with their revenue goals. And then you look back in 3 years and your sales team is 3 times larger than it needs to be because you haven't done marketing well. And then you have so much money invested, and then you have so much money invested in sales and people, and you need to keep those people busy. And so marketing continues to drive MQLs so that their salespeople have something to do, regardless of whether or not it's generating revenue. So it creates a lot of activity, the feeling of productivity, but not actual revenue production. Not at least at a level, not at least at a level that is deemed what I would deem an effective, efficient engine. And that I get that number through customer acquisition cost. And
actually, I wanted to ask you, once you acquire a new customer for Refined Labs, how do you map a go-to-market strategy and develop a revenue operations program? What is the initial point? How do you start mapping out these programs?
Yeah, so the core couple things is that we have a very well-defined ICP. And we define ICP through a couple different firmographic or behavioral type of ideas. The first one is that they sell a complex B2B product. Typically, those products will cost somewhere between $8,000 and $100,000 a year. So not super transactional, not super enterprise with year-long sales cycles. In the middle, where you need both scale and efficiency. And if you do marketing well, you can cut sales cycles super fast, like cut them in half. Okay. And that's where you start to see a big revenue acceleration. So average contract value is a huge indicator of whether or not companies will be successful with us. Size and mindset also matter. So how big is the company right now? Sometimes if you don't have enough marketing employees, you're not going to be able to support the things that we do. Or sometimes if you have too many marketing employees, like 60, there's too much organizational change for our process to be effective because you have too many people that you need to change the way that they do things. And so we end up being in the middle, usually marketing teams of 3 to 30 people. The CMO or the marketing leader must believe in this process, meaning that they know that the MQLs that they're generating are not leading to the result that they want, and they're ready to change that. Those are some of the core things that we need. And also that they're willing to invest in accelerating growth. So that would lend itself to VC or PE firms that are growing rapidly already. And so when you define your ICP in such a tight window, like I just did, the process that we take is actually quite similar for every company. The first step will be the audit that I spoke about, which is saying, okay, you spent $3.5 million on Google AdWords and LinkedIn ads and display ads last year. What happened to it? Analyze the strategy, analyze the metrics at the channel level, analyze metrics at the business level, the sales level, calculate customer acquisition cost by channel, by activity. And then you get to a stance and say, okay, how are the things that we're doing today working? And then and when you can say, okay, it looks like we're wasting at least $1 million a year on Google AdWords. And this is not like, I'm not making these numbers up. These are real things that I see. Like there are companies out there that are wasting $10 million a year on broad match Google AdWords ads that don't know well enough. They just chalk it up as an advertising expense and never audit the effectiveness of it. And so we'll immediately strip out the stuff that is clearly not working. We'll also might find a couple things that are working. So for instance, one thing that it works for some companies is to get people into using LinkedIn ads to get targeted people into webinars and then continue with a content stream, not with a sales cadence. And then over time, those people might be more open or more aware of buying things. And so that's one thing that we find companies might want to do a little bit more of. And then from there, we'll start to completely rip and replace their marketing, content, and advertising strategy to what we know works after repeating it at dozens of SaaS companies. And so that will be changing the metrics that we measure. So we're no longer measuring on MQLs, the people that downloaded ebooks. We're not using lead scoring to pass people that went on the pricing page to your SDRs. We're measuring on inbound sales conversions and all of the pipeline and revenue efficiency created off the people that submit that form, because that means you've done marketing so well that people are ready to talk to your sales team and buy things. And I think that is 100% aligned with how people want to buy. And when you align with how people want to buy, your sales cycles get shorter, your win rates get higher, your average contract values get higher, your retention usually gets better. And so for all those different reasons, that is the conversion point that I'm looking for. Typically, it's a demo request for a SaaS company, but sometimes for some companies, 30% of their inbound sales requests actually come through phone calls from a website. And so whatever that action is that says, hey, I want to have a meeting with your sales rep, not the company telling the prospect to have a meeting with them. There's a very, very much of a difference in psychology when the buyer comes to you. And so the way that we do that is by educating people, not thinking about them as leads that we can pass to sales, thinking about helping them understand the things that they need to know in order to help them understand why our product might be right for them or why the product might not be right for them because they already have a solution or they're doing something else or they're not the right fit or all these different things. By having a position in the market and educating people about it, you give people a clear choice about whether or not the product is a fit. And that requires being objective. It requires understanding your customers and having empathy for their situation and understanding their situation deeply so that you can talk to them as if you're a peer as opposed to a marketer trying to push them into a sales funnel.
And how do you persuade companies, clients, maybe stakeholders, to at least start implementing thought leadership? Because probably, I assume you face some resistance because it's not really clear how thought leadership and how helping your target audience correlates with SQLs, with sales qualified leads, because it's obvious and it's clear once you are running paid acquisition campaigns, so you are doing cold outreach, you send 100 emails, you get like 20 replies, from 20 replies you get like 2 meetings and you close 1 deal, but it's not really it's not predictable. And one of the concerns I assume you might face is like once we'll start seeing ROI from this campaign. What's your approach?
Yeah, I hear the ROI a lot. It's the mindset of people in executives in companies. Think about things like a salesperson, like a transaction,
like mess,
not like a brand. And so the idea that you would do something good for someone, like help them figure out something that doesn't have to do with your product and not get anything in return is weird for people, which doesn't really make a lot of sense when you think about your own relationships with people that you're friends with or your family or things like that. You do things that are nice for them all the time. You don't expect them to do something immediately nice back for you. That's called having a relationship with someone or building a brand. And so the first thing is like adjusting your mindset to it. However, the way that I've learned to get there, and I think that most companies should take this path because if you go too fast, you start working on thought leadership and you don't have the rest of the engine running, executives are going to kill it. I have watched executives kill a long form video thought leadership strategy after 3 videos because they didn't see any leads, which is a really, really, excuse my language, is dumb way to look at it. It's just not smart. And so the way that we do it is in a 4-step process. The first step is just building out the foundation so you can measure everything. A lot of sophisticated companies already have that set up. The next step is capture existing demand. So any people that are already looking for what you do, how are you there with an offer to help them to capture that demand? Review sites like G2 or Capterra, intent-based Google AdWords search, I want your software, I want this type of software, you better show up as number one. Some forms of retargeting. I like YouTube search query and YouTube website retargeting the best, because I like to run awareness in social, not conversion-based retargeting. So those type lead handoff optimization, conversion rate optimization on your landing pages or website, capture existing demand. The third step is create new demand, which is cold targeted paid social that educates people and creates what I like to call subconscious product consideration, which is that you're educating people, and through the education and brand awareness created, they subconsciously consider your solution. This is called psychology. And so they start to subconsciously consider your solution, and at some point they have an intent, and then they move back to, and then the things that we did in step 2, which is capture existing demand, you can then capture that demand. That's step 3. You can run heavy paid on that and create an engine just on those 2 things. And then the 4th step is win on brand, aka organic thought leadership in social, podcast, email, video, all those different things. And as you start getting better, because what happens is you have this paid engine running, which then buys you time. You're getting results. And then as you're getting results and this engine's running, you can then go and focus on organic without the pressure of getting results tomorrow. And then, so now you're running the organic thought leadership strategy in parallel to creating new demand. You don't have to generate a certain amount of leads because your existing engine's running. And then you have the space to go out and create videos, to get 35 episodes of a podcast, which is the amount that's required to get 500 subscribers or more, right? You have the space to build a YouTube channel, and it takes time to get 1,000 subscribers. You have the space to post every day on LinkedIn from your company page or your personal pages, or ideally both, which takes months or years to build a substantial following, even though you will get results earlier if you do it the right way. But substantial results take time when you build brand. And so by doing it in that sequence of events, I found it's the best way to kind of shepherd executives into this way of thinking, because they get results along the way. You start with the easiest step, direct response intent. And then the next easiest step is, let's just create small chunks of educational content and run it on paid. And then the hardest part is the thought leadership side. But as you succeed on the thought leadership side, you build brand, you drive more organic conversions, and your customer acquisition costs go down. And so the whole engine running in parallel is the way that I think it should be done.
That's fantastic. One thing I want to clarify is there any place for cold outreach in this engine?
So what I just structured is a marketing engine. So obviously sales is going to be doing direct outreach through a lot of different channels. I think that smart salespeople over the next 3 to 10 years will become better content marketers than direct outreach sellers. That I think that transition will happen. But for today, people are gonna go cold outbound. They're gonna use probably a 3-pronged strategy of social touches, email marketing, cold email marketing, and cold calling. And so a lot of people think that you need to have your sales and marketing orchestrated. I actually don't believe that that's 100% necessary to be successful. My theory is that you actually would have more success if they were running in parallel, but in the same direction. They're aligned on ICP, they're aligned on target accounts, they're aligned on this stuff, but they don't need to be going after the exact same company at the exact same time, because what happens when you do that is you actually just force your marketing team to be a sales team. You do the wrong things when you only have 20 accounts to go after because you built your ABM target list and sales is doing direct outreach all day and marketing is supposed to be over the top marketing to them. You just force your marketing team to become a second sales team, and I don't think that's the best way to do it.
Totally agree with you, and it also, answers the question. Lots of people tend to think that all marketing, all B2B marketing nowadays is account-based marketing, and that's obviously not true. Thanks a lot for nailing this topic. One quick question I want to ask you.
One thing to add on that on the ABM side that I think is interesting. So what we're in the process, it's in live beta with 2 companies that we work at right now, to somewhere between $10 and $50 million SaaS companies that we work with. We're in a live beta with them on what I think is a better approach to account-based marketing, which is a blend, almost 2 things running in parallel. So you have a demand generation strategy that has layered persona and account-based targeting at the same time. And so you have persona-based targeting that's going at scale, and then you're running the exact same demand gen strategy with account-based targeting in a more narrow fashion, maybe about, with a layered function targeting on top of it. But I think when people hear me say that, they might not fully understand what I mean, because they don't know the inner workings of the way that we do marketing. But that is something that I'm bullish on will be a lot more successful than the way that most companies practice ABM today.
One thing I want to ask you, I probably needed to ask it earlier, but anyway, how do you prioritize the campaigns you want to run with your clients? So once you did this audit, you got some data, you presented them a plan, and you actually showed the data where they're losing money, what can be fixed and improved. How do you come up with ideas? What should be the next program or the next campaign for them?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I don't think that I define campaign the same way that most people do. So some people will say, we're going to run this campaign and it's going to be 6 months long. I think about it like news cycles that happen in very short, rapid bursts. So each piece of content becomes its own campaign, right? And so this case study, this feature release, and you run it. And so you have, because what happens when you run a campaign for 6 months, especially on social, is that you fatigue your audience because you've shown them the same picture 100 times. And so what we do is we say, once on average, these people that we're going after have seen the content twice, I know that at that point, the results drop off a cliff. And at that point, we need to have another campaign piece of content to swap to. And so that requires some agility. But to get back to your question, we map our activities based on the objectives of the companies that we work at. So if they're launching a new product in August, then our activities will map to that strategic objective to launch the product. If they release a new feature, our activities will be focused on communicating to the new feature to the market. And so those are like the ways we guide companies on what to build and how to build it and what format and what creative to use and things like that, which is helpful. However, the organization that really needs to be in charge of what direction they're going and what they're promoting. So we know that in general, the content mix that we want to run is 1 case study per month, at least 2 short form written news articles per month, 1 product update per month, and then mixed in videos, pictures, other things that are closer to the bottom of the funnel. And so that type of content mix is what we kind of start with. And then over time, you might see certain things working better than others with your audience. So you start to optimize the mix of the types of content based on that, paired with the strategic objectives of the company.
Got it. I see some of questions coming from our community. Some of them I have already asked, but one question I assume we should definitely cover. How do you set up expectations for clients when they will get exact results?
So the expectation that I like to set is I'll measure their average inbound sales cycle length. And so let's just pretend a company's selling a $50,000 a year product and their sales cycle is on average 100 days, which is probably reasonable. then the idea is from the day that we start running ads times plus 2 times your average sales cycle length. So in this example, 200 days from now, you will experience the revenue results. However, we know what leading metrics to track to know that we're moving in that direction. The things that we're looking for. The first step at the channel level are we able to get the right people to read the content? Or how good is the targeting? What is the cost per click? How long are they spending on the page reading the content? Are they actually consuming the video? At the channel level, that's step one. The next thing that we're going to see, sometimes for some companies, it happens immediately. Other companies, it takes 7 to 30 days delay as we optimize the engine, is an increase in quality inbound sales conversions from ICP, the right job titles at the right companies. And so a lot of companies will have 1,000 demo requests, but if you actually strip down that only 20 of them are good because they're driving paid traffic with other things to drive people that may not be the right fit for the product. And so it's like we're focused on quality demo requests. And if you drive quality demo requests at an increased volume, you will see an increase in qualified pipeline generation from an SAL all the way through to whatever you deem as qualified. Sometimes it's post-demo, sometimes it's post-proposal. You'll see an increased amount of pipeline created. So what we'll do is on a chart, it will be on the x-axis create date, the date the opportunity was created by month. And then on the y-axis, it's the amount of estimated ARR for the deals. And you should see that moving up. And if you see that moving up and the deals progressing through the funnel, you know that you're going to get to the end result. The number one thing that we see at every company is that their sales reps are giving feedback to marketing saying the quality of the conversations that I'm having with these people is significantly better than before we started working with this company. That's the first step. And when I hear that, I know it's going to work. And so, but you need time. Like if you hire a sales rep tomorrow, you're not going to expect them to generate revenue in 30 days if your sales cycle is 100 days. It just doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't expect them to close a deal on day 100 either, because that means they would have to create an opportunity and run a flawless sales cycle starting on day one. And so it takes one sales cycle to build a pipeline, and it takes another sales cycle for that pipeline to materialize to revenue. So 2x average sales cycle length, that is, I think, the right amount of time to set expectations on.
Cool. Thank you so much for nailing this topic. I have basically on what you have shared with the audience, I have a bunch of questions, but let's stick to our schedule. That would be great to have
we could do a couple more.
Yeah. So because I want, right now I want to move to our Blitz questionnaire. It's actually a section where I ask a list of questions, and I would like to ask you just to answer with the first thing that will come up to your mind.
Cool.
So let's do it, and let's see how it will go. So the first question is, what is your strongest skill?
Understanding customers.
Cool. What book had the most significant impact on you?
Digital Darwinism by Tom Goodwin.
Who do you follow? Marketers, entrepreneurs, other people, and why?
I'm a big fan of Dave Gerhardt and Gaetano Dinardi, Gary Vaynerchuk. But I think what a lot of people will find is that the important thing is to follow people to get the core base of knowledge, and then it's about going and doing it for yourself. So at this point, like, I don't follow a ton of other people's content because I'm learning so much myself. And so I think that's a good insight for people, is use people to learn, but ultimately, in order to become an expert in what you're doing, you actually have to go out and do it a lot.
Cool. If you were starting right now and could do one thing, what would it be?
Could you repeat that? It was just a lag on the Zoom.
Okay. If you were starting your marketing career right now, or your business, your company, and you could do one thing differently, what would it be?
I would have started more side projects, like a podcast or an e-commerce company. I did those things. I just think that would be valuable to other people.
Cool. What is your number one learning from your marketing journey?
Listening to customers drives results.
Thank you so much. And let's cover one more question from the community, because I see that folks join us later. One question is, what do you think about shadow newsletters for nurturing your audience?
Yeah, so the first thing is that I really think that we should stop talking about it like a nurture. I think we should just talk about it like communicating. When you think about nurture, it's like, okay, we have this person, and how do we like move them through a sales funnel? And just the flat out, just like my experience is that thinking about it that way, one, drives you to do the wrong things, and two, usually doesn't work. And so I don't think about it like a nurture anymore. I think about it as, how am I going to communicate and educate and bring people valuable information as frequently as I can and do it better than anyone else. And so I never use automated email sequences unless it's like an autoresponder for a form submit or something. I never use a 5-step nurture sequence, because I'm producing content so much that they're seeing it in social. If there's something substantial enough, ideally on like a weekly basis, I'm going to send out the best piece of content every week, but it's just one. It's not a newsletter style with 30 choices of things to choose. It's just the best piece of content that I created that week will go out in an email to people. And the idea is that people think if you change the way that you think about this, it changes what you do. And so instead of, I need to create one piece of content to get someone's email to send them into an automated sequence, the difference is I'm going to produce so much content that I don't need the sequence. And I think if people change their mindset around that, they would get better results.
Cool. Thank you so much. It was brilliant chat. I really loved how you nailed the topic, and lots of, controversial opinion, especially about lead nurture and account-based marketing, and that's fantastic. I love it. That was like, and I love that quote about how marketers are afraid of rocking the boat to keep the stable place and be in a warm position. So yeah, it was a brilliant conversation. For our listeners, you guys can find a link to Chris' profile on LinkedIn in the podcast description. I highly recommend you to follow him, because as he mentioned already, he produces consistently valuable content. And I also add a link to Chris' recent chat with revenue operations, and also about the events, about the communication with audience. I love these videos. I nailed the topics. I provided really great insights. They're controversial to what lots of marketers tend to think, but if you'll at least try this approach, that would be, from my point of view, of course, that would be a game changer for your organization or for your clients. And also, in the description, you'll find a link to Refine Labs website. Thanks a lot for joining me today. Was fantastic, and I hope to jump with you in some future episodes to discuss more stuff, because we have lots of questions to ask you.
Yeah, sounds great. Would be more than happy to come back and do this again. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.